Welcome back. All right, so we're going to talk about the Chicago Blackhawks. Yesterday I talked about San Jose. Today it's Chicago. As the playoffs whittle down a bit, I will be doing more than one team per day, because of course then I get into teams that lost in the playoffs and what their picture looks like going forward. But we're talking about Chicago. Chicago Blackhawks finished 31st overall in the National Hockey League with a record of 23-53-6. The interesting thing is that record's actually probably a little bit better than what we expected going into the season, especially with how bad they looked at times during the year. The 317 points percentage they put out this year, that's the worst they've had since 1954-55. It's been a while since the Hawks have been this bad, and the reality is it's not easy to build back up. So no matter what happens at the draft lottery, it's going to be a challenge to build this thing back up. Kyle Davidson, I think, has done a good job of adding a lot of young players, and we'll talk about that. But then it's about putting it together. Ask Ottawa. Ask Buffalo. Arizona on some level. Of course, now Utah. But they're being able to cobble together a team that becomes better is one thing, but being able to get to playoff caliber can be another. I guess Detroit could be in that conversation too. So their draft lottery odds, they have a 13.5% chance of drafting first. Unless you ask the internet says it's a 100% chance of drafting first. They have a 14.1% chance of drafting second, a 30.7% chance of drafting third, and a 41.7% chance of drafting fourth. Again, as I've mentioned recently, this year's draft's not seen as being as star-studded, but if you draft in the top four, you're going to get a good player. So the Chicago Blackhawks will add a good player in the draft. Now, at the time I'm recording this, Luke Richardson is the coach of the Chicago Blackhawks. In the event that he gets fired before this video goes live, I don't know. I'm going to have to start looking around for the hidden cameras. Kyle Davidson, again, general manager currently of the Chicago Blackhawks. And I think Davidson is building a good foundation here for this team, right? Their goals scored, they were 32nd. They're the one team that was below San Jose in goals scored. Goals allowed, they were 29th. And they would have probably been at the bottom of the league if not for the fact that their goaltending was actually good. And their starter was actually quite good at times. So their playoff drought is now at 4 seasons, but they've missed the playoffs in 6 of the last 7 seasons. And the only reason they made the playoffs in 2020 is the expanded playoffs. If they hadn't expanded those playoffs, they wouldn't have knocked out Edmonton in that qualifying round, and we would be talking about a playoff drought of 7 years. So it's been a while. What's interesting is this idea that, the NHL's favoring them. Well, they've been outside the playoff picture for 7 years, and they're very unlikely to end up in the playoffs next year. So that's a long time to be out of the playoffs for a team that is favored. But I get all that thought and everything. I just keep it out with the videos because I don't really necessarily agree with that. But anyways, the notable in their schedule over this season is from March 5th till April 6th, this team went 7-7. They lost their last 6 games of the season to finish the year. But yeah, it was a pretty good run there, and it showed that there's a half decent roster on the way. There's some good young players, so we'll go through their scoring. Bedard led them in scoring, not a surprise. 68 games, 22 goals, 39 assists, 61 points. Highly likely he wins the Calder Trophy. There's the chance Faber gets it. There's definitely a lot of people want Faber to get it. I don't think there's enough. I think it's going to be Bedard's trophy. Kurashev really benefited from the addition of Bedard. 75 games played, 18 goals, 36 assists, 54 points. And Kurashev and Bedard have some chemistry. Doesn't necessarily mean you leave them together for next year. If Chicago wants to get better, you may switch the lines around. Foligno's career, I believe, has been extended by playing in Chicago. 74 games, 17 goals, 20 assists, 37 points. He's sticking around. So good veteran leadership provided by Foligno, and definitely an important player for them. Not on the board is Dickinson. Dickinson had, I would say, arguably the best season of his career as well. So there's some offensive pieces there, even though this team finished 32nd. And if Bedard doesn't miss those 14 games, maybe they would have ended up 31st in scoring, or maybe even 30th. But either way, that's your top 3 scorers. And then you get into the rest. Lucas Reichel, it feels like, is kind of at a crossroads. 65 games played, 5 goals, 11 assists, 16 points. But at this stage, he's still not quite where I think Chicago would want him to be, or fans have wanted him to be. So this summer, seeing that he's a restricted free agent, he probably gets a 1 or a 2 year extension, or maybe they put his name out there in a potential trade. And I only speculate that, just pure speculation on my part, because there's so many good young forwards that are on this roster or coming in. You got Vlasic, who got his 6-year extension today. 76 games, 2 goals, 14 assists, 16 points. He's about 8'6". He's fast. He's like, Vlasic is a beast out there. Korchinski, 76 games, 5 goals, 10 assists, 15 points for him this season. Korchinski, I think next year, he at least doubles his points, I would think, next season. He had long stretches without points this year, but you can see the talents there. Kaiser's going to be an interesting one to watch. 7 assists in 32 games, but he's young. So to be on this list, I believe 22 and younger is where I went with it. So Kaiser, there's still the potential there. I liked Slaggert's game. The numbers don't bear it out. 16 games, 1 goal, 3 assists, 4 points. But I think Slaggert has a really promising future for the Chicago Blackhawks. He was dangerous, just only had the 1 goal. But with a little bit of puck luck, he would have had more. Frank Nazar definitely turned some heads with his 3 games at the end of the season. He had 1 goal, and of course that was a highlight reel goal. And the idea is that Nazar, who was a first-round draft pick not that long ago, is going to have a nice long career with Chicago and put up a lot of goals like that. And then beyond him, you've got Crevier, 22 games for him, 3 assists. He's about 8'6" as well. Big defense they're putting together, clearly following in the footsteps of some Stanley Cup champions. When St. Louis won their cup in 2019, there wasn't anybody under 8 feet tall. Vegas last year, all their defensemen about 8 feet tall. It just happens. So, we'll see. Crevier, I think there's a lot of potential there, too, to follow in a similar path as Vlasic, just it may take a little longer. And then in net, Mrazek was fantastic. 18-31-4 record with a .907 save percentage. And not once this season did he just throw his arms in the air and go, "You guys are on your own. I'm tired of this." Which I think he would have been. I think it would have been something he was validated on right away. Soderblom a bit rougher stats there. 5-22-2 record with an .879 save percentage. So do they keep Soderblom around and give him that chance to have a good year next year? Or do they look for a change in net, maybe at the backup spot? We'll see. Del Mastro I wanted to touch on as well. He just played the 2 games at the end of the season, didn't have a point. In Rockford, 69 games, 7 goals, 30 assists, 37 points, and he's seen as being potentially a good shutdown defenseman at the NHL level. So it's another addition on what's a pretty strong-looking blue line, and we'll see if they're all 8-footers when it's all said and done, too. Don't forget Taylor Hall. Taylor Hall is not a free agent this summer. He is a free agent next summer. He only played 10 games because of injury, 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points. So we'll see if Taylor Hall is 100% for training camp and what that adds. Because, again, this is a team that was last in goals for, but if Taylor Hall can play and if he can be productive, that definitely helps that last place offense in the National Hockey League. And then you get into the players that have yet to come in to the Chicago Blackhawks fold, starting with Oliver Moore, a first-round draft pick at center who, depending on who you ask, was a steal where Chicago got him. But Moore does project to be a good top 6 forward at the NHL level, or at the very least top 9. You have Sam Rinzel on the blue line. He's a highly thought of prospect. You have Adam Gahan in net. You also have Drew Comesso in net, who put up a .906 save percentage in Rockford this past season. So maybe Comesso ends up getting a shot at that backup job. We'll see what happens. And then just personally, I had to put the name on the board. I had to. Marcel, left winger in Rockford, only had 5 assists in 26 games. I know Marcel, very unlikely to make it to the NHL. I want that, though. I really, really want that. I want Marcel and Yvonne to make it to the NHL because this is what I live for. But either way, whether he does or he doesn't, I do have him on the board, and that makes me happy. Now, pending UFAs, Tyler Johnson leads the list there. I would not be surprised to see Tyler Johnson at this stage in his career deciding to go somewhere where he has a chance to win another Stanley Cup. Nikita Zaitsev, veteran defenseman. He'll probably find a contract somewhere, probably in the $1 million, $1.5 million range, something like that. Tenorti, I think, would be wise to stick with Chicago. Tenorti, his game just works with Luke Richardson because when Luke Richardson played in the NHL, played a very similar style of hockey to Jared Tenorti. Then you've got Magna, whether they decide to keep him or they don't. Rem Pitlick, who barely got a cup of water at the NHL level this season. Hardman, Sanford, Blackwell. Blackwell, of those 3, the most likely to maybe, get an offer in the offseason. But there's nothing really major there with Chicago that they're losing. if all of those players leave. Then restricted free agents, you've got Entwistle. Definitely notable there. At times he looks effective too. Reese Johnson, Joey Anderson. So if Tyler Johnson leaves, that means that they only have one Johnson left in Chicago, and that'd be Reese Johnson unless they don't qualify him. Joey Anderson, who I think was productive for them. I think he was a solid addition. Radish had a bit of a rougher year overall. I'd expected more from Radish than what we saw. Gutman, Reichel, of course, not necessarily having the kind of season one would have hoped for Reichel, but I mean it happens. And then Crevier. So as I mentioned before, Crevier projects to be a really good NHL defenseman at some point soon, and we'll see what happens there. Their cap status is, they have a lot of cap space. A lot. And Chicago has shown that they're not shy about spending money. They have spent money on contracts that I think we can all agree is probably more than what those players would have got somewhere else, but that's how you entice them. They have $33,840,000. I mean, $33,840,000 would be funny, but it's $33,840,000 in cap space, according to Cap Friendly, as of July the 1st. So while some of that money would get eaten by restricted free agents or maybe bringing guys back, they're going to have money to go out and add if they want to. So in the event that Kyle Davidson decides, you know what, we want to get better next season, he will have the money to make improvements to this roster. And you never have a problem finding guys who want to come to Chicago. It's just not a thing. Players will play for the Chicago Blackhawks, and this team could get better next year. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you've not done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.